So about spouses, my first question is, if a spouse discovers that his or her spouse has been looking at pornography, what do? Is it okay to be angry?
Yeah, so I think anger is an appropriate response. The most common responses tend to be anger and some kind of sorrow or depression, often overwhelmingly so. And I would want to say that anger and sorrow are completely appropriate responses in the aftermath of the discovery of porn. And that's not just my opinion. We know that that's appropriate because God is angry and sad about sin. So in fact, it would be wrong if you found out that your spouse was looking at porn and you weren't angry and you weren't sad. If your spouse is sinning and is sinning against you and you are indifferent to that, or you think that's awesome, and some people do think it's awesome. I mean, I've known people that are thrilled to find out something bad about their spouse because they're looking for a way out. They're like, yes, this is my ticket out. Well, that's sinful on your part. If you are not angry or sad or both, I'd want to say you need to repent of that, because our job is to respond to sin the way God does. And so you should be angry, you should be sad. The qualifier on that is you can't sin in your anger. You can't sin in your sorrow. So you can't say, well, I'm angry, so I'm going to hit you in the face. You can't, I had one wife that was furious with her husband in this way, as she should have been. She's supposed to be angry. But she, in the overflow of her anger, she picked up a skillet where she was cooking something, and she hit him in the head repeatedly with it. Blacked his eye, cut his head all up. He had to have stitches. He had burns on his head from the grease in the pan. She was right to be angry, but she sinned in her anger. So Psalm 4 and Ephesians 4 says, be angry and do not sin. And so you can't use your legitimate anger to sin. The larger question of what do we do when you find out that your spouse is looking at pornography is you really should get help from somebody else. You should reach out to somebody that you love and trust who can help you on this.
So it's just the two of you ain't enough?
The two of you are not enough. That's a great question, because a lot of couples think, well, we'll just sort this out. We're going to sort this out, and it's embarrassing. I don't want anybody to know my husband's looking at porn, or I don't want anybody to know my wife is looking at porn, so we'll just sort this out together. But the reality is that's a really bad idea, because you are too emotionally invested in this to figure out what wisdom is. There's all sorts of things that a person who's going to help somebody change needs to do that a spouse is not equipped to do. And so one of the first things you should do is reach out for help from somebody with wisdom. And honestly, the safest bet is to talk to one of the pastors and just say, here's what's going on, we need some help.
Should a wife turn to her closest friends? Does it have to be a pastor?
That depends. In Ephesians 4:15, the Bible says, speaking the truth in love, we grow up into him who is the head, into Christ. And so in Ephesians 4:15, the goal is maturity into Jesus, and the way we get that maturity is by speaking the truth in love. And so the two rules for how we talk to people is, I say true things in a loving way. So I'm looking for somebody who's going to say true things in a loving way. If my best friend is going to say true things in a loving way, then you can talk to your best friend. But if your best friend isn't going to do that, then you need to talk to somebody else. And you just have to be honest with yourself in this, because a lot of times the most comfortable person to tell isn't the best person to tell. And I've mentioned before that I had one lady that went to her best friend, and her best friend decided that it'd be an awesome way to get back at her husband by taking her to singles bars to meet men. So she reached out to her best friend, but that was a bad idea. So sure, reach out to close friends as long as they're going to speak the truth in love. And also, the need to tell somebody does not equal the need to tell everybody. You ought to try to keep the circle as small as possible. You don't need 50 people knowing about it.
Another question is, many women, when they find out that their husband is struggling with pornography, become self-conscious, kind of about themselves, about how they look. Are wives ever the cause? And will changing her appearance change the situation? Can it change the situation?
So I'll answer that question in two ways. First thing to say is your appearance in your marriage is important. I really encourage married couples. My wife and I do a lot of pre-marriage counseling, and we are always encouraging couples at the beginning of their marriage or almost marriage. Don't let yourselves go when you get married. Work to try to maintain your physical appearance. We live in a broken world. Everybody gets older. Things start to spread out and sag. It's going to happen to all of us sooner or later. But you don't want to let yourself go and just say, well, who cares? Sex is a guarantee. You do want to try to work on your appearance. I want my wife to think I'm attractive. Some of you might think that's impossible, but I'd like to do the best I can. She married me and you didn't, so she already signed off on that to some extent. But I want to be concerned that she would find me attractive, and so I don't want to just let myself go. But having said that, that is not a fix for pornography. As true as what I just said is that you need to take responsibility for your appearance and not let yourself go, if your husband is struggling with pornography, there's nothing you can do with regard to your appearance to fix it. Because husbands don't look at porn because they are not attracted to their wives. That's not why they look at porn. Most women misunderstand this. So if you're a woman here, really hear me well. Because here's what's happened. I've had this conversation 100,000 times. Wife says, I can't have sex with him anymore after this porn thing because he clearly thinks I'm ugly. And he's going, baby, I don't think you're ugly. Well, if you don't think I'm ugly, then why are you looking at all these women online? And a wife wrongly thinks that her husband's looking to women on porn is a reflection of what he thinks about her appearance, and that's not it. Really, husbands are telling the truth when they say, I am attracted to you, and I also looked at porn. And you will understand how both of those things can be true when you understand the nature of lust. The logic of lust is, I want more. That's what lust is. Lust says, I need the next thing. Lust is not content with what you've been given. It wants what it doesn't have. And so this is why, so you young guys here and you young gals, hear me out on this one. Everybody thinks, I'm young, I'm tempted sexually, maybe I'm struggling with porn, maybe I'm not struggling with porn, but I struggle with masturbation, or maybe I struggle with going too far with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and what is happening is we'll get married and we'll have all the sex you can have and it'll fix the problem, and it will not. If you are, the greatest predictor of porn use and unfaithfulness in marriage is whether or not you have been chaste outside of marriage. If your boyfriend or your girlfriend is pushing lines with you right now before you're married, that's the greatest predictor that they'll be sexually immoral when you get married. Because lust wants what it doesn't have. And you think that once you're together and having sex, it'll fix it. But what happens is once you're married, now they've got you. But what does lust want? Lust wants what it doesn't have. So the honeymoon will be a blast. But before long, you'll start wanting what you don't have, because that's the way lust works. And so a woman can be absolutely beautiful in her husband's eyes, and he will still want what he doesn't have if he's nurturing lust. And so a wife can't think her appearance is responsible for her husband's porn. It is not, because it cannot be, because that's not the way the human soul works. Lust works by wanting more. And so the way to fix it for a wife is not with a different hairstyle or with weight loss or with different makeup or with different clothes or with more exciting sexual experiences. The way to fix it is by nurturing a heart of contentment in a man who's pleased with what the Lord has given him and is fighting any kind of lust.
That's a good answer. How do you forgive in the face of such pain? How do you forgive, and what does forgiveness look like?
So the first thing you have to say about forgiveness is that you have to do it. You have to forgive. I don't know stories in this room, but I know the stories exist. I just don't know what they are. In my experience, most of my counseling experience is marriage counseling. Most of the marriage counseling I've done has been counseling in the aftermath of betrayal, either adultery or pornography. And just to be very candid with you, in my experience, the most challenging experience in counseling is helping a wife forgive after that kind of betrayal. Wives cheat too, and wives look at pornography too. But it is often a significant challenge for wives to forgive in the aftermath of that betrayal. And you need to settle it right now that you have to forgive. And the reason you have to forgive is because Jesus says so. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 18 that you must forgive your brother from the heart. I think that's the most controversial teaching in the Bible. I do. That will get people who've been victimized more upset than just about anything that you could say. Because what it feels like to them is they were wronged by this jerk over here, and now you're giving them something to do. And the problem with it is the root of that is pride as well. I have never known somebody who refused to forgive and was humble. That is to say, you show me somebody who refuses to forgive, and I will show you somebody who is only thinking about the other person's sin and not thinking at all about their sin. When you understand that you swim in an ocean of forgiving grace, that Jesus Christ has forgiven every single sin that you could ever commit, that you have ever commit, and that you will ever commit, Jesus forgives you of that. When you are focused on that, then you'll be able to spare little thimbles of forgiving grace for other people, because nobody can ever sin against you as much as you have sinned against the Lord of heaven and earth. And so we've got to nurture a heart of humility here, and you have to forgive. I think what forgiveness looks like is, I think we can forgive and still be frustrated. I think we can forgive and still be distrustful. I think we can forgive and still have questions about what the future looks like, because forgiveness doesn't describe how we feel. It's a promise that we make. So when I say I forgive you to somebody, I'm promising not to dwell on this in my own mind. I'm promising that when I start to think about what you did and how you looked at pornography and how you did it maybe for years and didn't tell me, I'm promising to make it my responsibility to deal with that. One of the things I'm doing in counseling all of the time is helping women and men know how to do that. When you start to get on the ramp of stewing about what your spouse did to you, that right there is the alarm that you have to go to the Lord in prayer and say, Lord, forgive me. I promised I would forgive. I'm tempted not to do that. Would you give me grace to forgive my spouse? And I'm helping couples think about 4, 5, 6 things about their spouse that are wonderful that they can remember in those times of weakness. Because it doesn't matter how much porn your spouse is looking at, doesn't matter what kind of adulterous situation they were in, you married them, and so there are things about them that you love. There are things about them that are good. And so I'm saying, hey, let's make a list of what those things are, and let's go to that list when I'm tempted to get upset. So I'm not gonna think about the fact that my wife cheated on me. Lord, give me grace to think about what a great mom she is. Give me grace to think about what a great daughter she's been. I mean, maybe she's got a wonderful relationship with her parents and she's so serving of them. Give me grace to think about how funny she is. And so I'm just going through that list. And if you really think on that hard, you'll be in a different place when you've rehearsed that list than you were at the beginning. So forgiveness is a promise not to dwell on it in my mind. And if you can fight that war well, you're on track to do the other two things well. Secondly, it's a promise that I'm not going to bring it up to you to hurt you with it. So I'm promising that the next time we get in an argument, I'm not going to say things like, well, I'm not the one who was looking at porn. You were. Well, hold on now. You said, I forgive you. And you just threw that right in my face. And forgiveness is a promise that you won't do that. And then forgiveness in the third instance is a promise that I'm not going to bring it up to other people. So I'm not going to go out to breakfast with the girls and say, well, do you know how much porn he's looking at? Jerk. You're damaging him and his reputation, and that's an evidence that you haven't forgiven him. So I think that's the three battles that we want to fight on as far as what forgiveness looks like. And the last thing I would say about that is, some of you in here right now either are or will meet people who don't need to be worried about forgiveness right then because they've got a spouse who is unrepentant and they're looking at porn. And so if you've got a spouse that's doing whatever they want to do and they don't care what you think and they're looking at porn, your first job is not to fight to forgive them. Your first job is to confront them with their sin and call them to repentance. And once they're repentant, then we talk about forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't the first thing we do in every situation, particularly with unrepentant people.
Let me just, because this is powerful, just really quickly. So forgiveness is three things. One is we promise not to dwell on it. Two is we promise not to.
Two, you recite positive things about them. You change your way of thinking.
That's just one of the things that I do to help people not dwell on it, but to think about something else. So first it's I won't dwell on the sin, but I'll dwell on good things about you. Second is I'm not going to bring it up to you to hurt you with it. And third is I won't bring it up to other people.
Yeah. Thank you. That's powerful.
So many women, in an attempt to not be hurt again, will be constantly picking up the cell phone, browsing through the history, will be looking over their husband's shoulders to, is he looking at somebody? You write in your book that this is actually can be more damaging to the marriage.
So they become the police officer.
Yeah. How is this so? And what would you recommend that they do instead?
Yeah. So I really strongly encourage women that in the aftermath of a discovery that your husband has been looking at porn, that you not be the person who's investigating, that's being his accountability partner. You don't want to be the person that's asking him the hard questions, that's looking at the accountability reports. That is a really bad idea. Many women want to do it. Many women say, well, I'm the accountability partner, and I got a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you, and you're going to answer every single last one of them. And one of the things that my wife and I, when we do counseling with couples like this, one of the things we're doing is we're calling women off of that. And I think what women want in that is they felt betrayed, and they want to try to recover some knowledge and some control that they've lost during that period of deception. The reason it doesn't work is because you've got to be a wife to your husband. And you cannot be a wife to your husband if you are the private investigator, if you're the police officer that's trying to find the next crime. The reality is that it will warp your marriage if you and your husband start to see it as your responsibility to be kind of lurking around and try to catch him messing up. Women think, I've heard so many women say, well, I just can't trust him, so I have to see the accountability reports. But what I'm always telling women is, if you're the one who's investigating his internet history, you're not learning to trust your husband, you're learning to trust the results of your investigation. And so it just increases your suspicion. It just increases your doubt, and it will make the restoration of your marriage that much harder. So what do? somebody needs to be asking your husband questions. Somebody needs to be looking at his internet history. It just doesn't need to be you. And so what we do when we're helping couples who are dealing with this is we ask the couple to agree on a third person who would be the accountability partner for the offending spouse. That person is the one, sometimes it's me, but a lot of times my schedule doesn't permit me to be that sort of point person. But whoever they agree on, that person is the one who's getting the accountability reports. That person is the one who's meeting regularly and asking the hard questions. And we have an arrangement where that third party is available to the spouse who's been offended. And they're free to say encouraging things. When you see them at church, say, hey, I want you to know your husband's rocking it. He's being awesome. Like, you should really be encouraged. The Lord is changing him. That's really encouraging for a wife to hear that from somebody outside of the marriage. If a wife has suspicions that something's going on with her husband, hey, first thing you do is talk to your husband about that. Hey, babe, you came to bed really late last night. When you struggled with porn before, you were always up really late. Like, what's going on with that? If she's not satisfied with the answer that she gets from that, then she has freedom to go to that third party and say, hey, here's what he's doing. I'm concerned. Can you help out here? So the wife needs to know that someone is doing it, and she needs to know that she has access to that person if she needs help, but she should not be the person who's the sort of police officer.
Last question before we switch to parenting. The hardest conversation I think that we have and we've had is also with that wife. Man, it's tough. And sometimes we get a wife to, come in and it's like, all right, that's my grounds for divorce. In your opinion, is pornography grounds for divorce? And what would you say to these women who, that's it, I'll never trust them again, I'm ready to leave?
So in some ways, the answer to the question depends on, because different people have different views of divorce, and then even within, after you've decided on your view of divorce and remarriage, then not all porn problems are created equal. So some people, I've done counseling with people who their struggle with pornography looks like indulging in pornography every couple of months. Some people it's every couple of weeks. Some people it's every day. Some people, I've done counseling with some guys who are in deep, and they can't imagine going 4 hours, spending a day where they don't spend 4 hours looking at porn. So, there's a spectrum of problems. In general, I would say, no, pornography is not a reason for divorce. And my own perspective, I would just say, no, porn isn't a reason for divorce. And so certainly not initially, even if you have a different perspective on divorce and remarriage than what a lot of us have, I would still say we're not ready to make that decision in the early days or even in the early weeks. Most of the time when wives say that, or when husbands say, actually I've never heard husbands say it, I've heard wives say it, I've never heard a husband say it. But when wives say that, most of them don't even mean they want a divorce. They mean, I'm really frustrated with you, and I am trying to communicate to you that you better fix this, and you better fix it quick, because I can't do this. That's what they're trying to communicate. And I think if we can kind of parse through the sort of headline of divorce, ! We can kind of get a little further than just... So no, I don't think it is. And I think what we need to do is address the real urgent concerns that wives have rather than sort of entertain that possibility.
Yeah. Thank you.